Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
All right, welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War, and specifically the first ever Battles of the American Civil War, Behind the Battles. I don't know, there was nothing else really to call it.
something like that.
Biographies, profiles, I don't know. You do what the graphic's going to say behind the battle, so
Sure.
that's what it's going to be. If you guys are new, we just finished up the whole entirety of the Civil War, battle by battle.
And we did not skip one that wasn't recorded as an official battle. I'm sure there's many more that
Right, well, we did
we could have done.
every battle recognized by the American Battlefield
Right.
Institution or whatever. But 300 and something battles. It took us 2.5 years to finish the podcast. So we did it from the very first to the very last. And now we're kind of behind the battles doing the life profiles of some of the most famous figures.
What led everybody to this point in history?
Basically, yeah.
1861 at Fort Sumter.
How do you know? We got to start it off with America's favorite president, Abe Lincoln. There are going to be 4 parts of Abraham Lincoln because this guy, everybody wrote about everything he did. Yeah, there's going to be 4 parts of him. We're going to do his early life leading up into getting into politics, and then we're going to do the second part is going to be him, his early years as a politician. The third part is going to be his run for presidency and then covering the election, and then obviously the fourth part is going to be. The second part is that the election, him first getting elected. The third part is going to be his presidency, and then the fourth part is obviously going to be his assassination. So,
His re-election and then assassination.
well, yeah, something like that. So yeah, and then after this, we'll do.
Isn't that crazy that they assassinate him right after he got elected a second term because they knew his vice president was going to be president? They would have done it before. Do you think Andrew Johnson would have won the presidency? I don't think so.
Well, we can get to that and the assassination one because there's obviously conspiracy theories out there that Johnson was involved, just like the other Johnson with Kennedy. So
Yeah, that's definitely true.
yeah.
CIA records prove it.
Oh, there was no CIA in Abe's time, so
Not Abe's time.
after Abe, we'll move on from person to person. Any person we can get a notable biography on, we're covering that was involved in the Civil War, plus notable events like shipwrecks. We'll cover some prisons that a lot of people died in due to sanitary issues and whatnot, and lots of stuff. So this podcast is far from over. If you've been listening and if you're new to it, go back and listen to the actual battle episodes. If not, then here you are. This is how backstory this guy is. We're going to talk about his first known ancestors in America first. So,
Oh, wow.
His first known ancestor in America was Samuel Lincoln, who migrated from Hingham, England to Hingham, Massachusetts, 1637.
Oh, wow. He decided to go to his namesake, huh?
Yeah, it's probably...
That's cool.
They left Hingham to form a Hingham. Well, Samuel's son, Mordecai. Well, that's a very 1600 name.
That's a very Amish name nowadays.
Right. Well, Lincoln did look a little Amish.
It's true.
His son,
And
Mordecai,
Massachusetts.
he remained in Massachusetts, but Samuel's grandson, who was also named Mordecai, began the family's western migration.
Oh.
John Lincoln, Samuel's great-grandson, continued the westward journey. Born in New Jersey, John moved to Pennsylvania, then brought his family to Virginia, not exactly west, but
Right.
John's son, Captain Abraham Lincoln, who earned that rank for service in the Virginia militia, was the future president's paternal grandfather and namesake.
Fantastic.
Born in Berks County, Pennsylvania, more Amish connections there.
Yeah.
He moved with his father and other family members to Virginia's Shenandoah Valley sometime before 1768.
Look at that. The family, they settled near Linville Creek in Augusta County, now Rockingham County, Virginia. Captain Lincoln, he bought a total of 452 acres in Rockingham County. That's a lot, including some of his father's property before the family moved to Kentucky. Thomas Lincoln, the future president's father, was born in Virginia, January 1778, and moved west. He was one of the first natural-born citizens, huh? Fantastic.
Well, 2 years. I'm sure there was a lot between 76 and 78.
Right. And then they moved west to Jefferson County, Kentucky, with his father, mother, and siblings. They did that around 1782. He was about 5 years old. May 1786, the age of 42, Captain Abraham Lincoln was killed in an Indian ambush while working his fields in Kentucky. Oh, that's the start of the Lincoln curse.
Oh, wow. Well, 8-year-old Thomas, he witnessed his father's murder and might have ended up a victim if his brother Mordecai had not shot the attacker. After Captain Lincoln's death, Thomas's mother, Bathsheba Lincoln, she moved to Washington County, Kentucky, while Thomas worked at odd jobs in several Kentucky locations. Thomas also spent a year working in Tennessee before finally settling with members of his family in Hardin County, Kentucky in the early 1800s.
All right. So, okay, we got the Kentucky roots down and Pennsylvania roots and Massachusetts roots.
Right.
Virginia. The identity of Lincoln's maternal grandfather is unclear. Conversation with William Herndon, Lincoln's law partner and one of his biographers. The president implied that his grandfather was a Virginia planter or a large farmer, but he did not identify him at all.
Oh, so you can read between the lines there and say his grandfather probably owned a plantation with many, many slaves.
Lincoln felt that it was from his aristocratic grandfather that he had inherited his power of analysis, his logic, his mental activity, his ambition, and all the qualities that distinguished him from the other members and descendants of the Hanks family.
That's his maternal side's name.
Supposedly.
Right. Lincoln's maternal grandmother, Lucy Hanks, she may have migrated to Kentucky with her daughter, Nancy. There was a debate over whether Lincoln's mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, was born out of wedlock. I mean, okay. Mitochondrial DNA tests of descendants of Lucy Hanks have shown this to be true, though.
Oh.
Who cares?
Right.
Nancy resided with Rachel Shipley Berry and her husband, Richard Berry Sr. in Washington County, Kentucky. She's believed to have remained with the Berry family after her mother's marriage to Henry Sparrow, which took place several years after the women arrived in Kentucky.
So that's Lincoln's maternal grandmother.
Right.
The Berry home was about 1.5 miles from the home of Thomas Lincoln's mother. The families were neighbors for 17 years. Mm-hmm. During this very time that Thomas met Nancy. Thomas Lincoln, Nancy Hanks married 12th of June, 1806. They did that at the Beach Fork Settlement, Washington County, Kentucky. The Lincolns moved to Elizabethtown, Kentucky following their marriage.
All right, and here's where the rumors start to fly, because biographers have rejected numerous rumors, they say, about Lincoln's paternity. According to historian William E. Barton, one of these rumors began circulating in 1861 in various forums in several sections of the South, of course. Right. And they say that Lincoln's biological father was Abraham Enlow, who was a resident of Rutherford County, North Carolina, who died in that same year. However, Barton dismissed the rumors as false from beginning to end. How do you know?
Right.
Enlow publicly denied his connection to Lincoln, but is reported to have privately confirmed it, though. Oh, so Lincoln's a little bastard child? No. Well, it gets a little more dicey.
Right. The Bostic Lincoln Center in Bostic, North Carolina, also claims that Abraham Lincoln was born in Rutherford County, North Carolina, and argues the case that Nancy Hanks had a illegitimate child while she was working for the Enlow family. That makes sense.
Those illegitimate children.
Rumors of Lincoln's ethnic and racial heritage were also circulated, especially after he entered national politics. Citing Chauncey Burr's Catechism, which references a pamphlet by a Western author adducing evidence, quote unquote. David J. Jacobson has suggested that Lincoln was part Negro, but the claim is unproven. Lincoln also received mail that called him a Negro and a mulatto.
Well, during his later years, Lincoln was reluctant to discuss his origins. He viewed himself as a self-made man and may have also found it difficult to confront the untimely deaths of his mother and sister.
Right. I mean, what's the matter?
However, around the time of his nomination as candidate for president, he provided 2 brief biographical sketches in response to 2 inquiries that provide a glimpse of youth in Kentucky and Indiana.
No.
One request for a campaign biography came from his friend and fellow Illinois Republican Jesse Fell. That came in 1859, and the other request came from John Locke Scripps, who was a journalist for the Chicago Press and Tribune.
In Lincoln's response to Scripps, he summed up his early life in a quote from Thomas Gray's elegy written in a country churchyard. He said this, "The short and simple annals of the poor." That's what Lincoln said.
Okay.
Additional details of Lincoln's early life appeared after his death in 1865. William Herndon began collecting letters and interviews from Lincoln's friends, family, acquaintances. Herndon published his collected materials in Herndon's Lincoln, The True Story of a Great Life. He did that in 1889. Although Herndon's work is often challenged, as everything is,
right.
Historian David Herbert Donald,
Can't have 3 first names. Too. Come on.
He argues that he can have 3 first names.
And I do.
He says they have largely shaped current beliefs about Lincoln's early life in Kentucky, Indiana, and his early days in Illinois.
All right, well, now that's out of the way. Let's get to Lincoln. Okay?
Let's get to the facts.
Right. February 10th, 1807, Sarah Lincoln was born. December 1808, Thomas, Nancy, and their daughter, Sarah. They moved from Elizabethtown to the Sinkin Spring Farm on Nolan Creek near Hodgins Mill in Hardin County, Kentucky.
Oh.
It's now part of the Abraham Lincoln Birthplace National Historical Park. Abraham, he was born at the farm 2 months after the move in February on February 12th, 1809.
Due to a land title dispute, family lived at the farm for only 2 years before being forced to move. Thomas continued
2 more years.
Right, 2 more years after they moved in. Thomas, he continued legal action in court, but lost the case in August of 1816. Kentucky's survey methods, which used a system of mates and bounds to identify and describe land descriptions, proved to be unreliable when the natural features of the land changed. Right.
Oh.
This issue, compounded by confusion over previous land grants and purchase agreements, caused continual legal disputes over land ownership in Kentucky for years to come.
Gotta get your shit together, Kentucky.
Summer of 1811, family relocated to Knob Creek Farm, now a part of Abraham Lincoln's Birthplace National Historical Park, 8 miles to the north.
That's not too bad. Yeah. Situated in a valley of the Rolling Fork River, they had some of the best farmland in the area.
Damn
Good for
right.
you then.
Right.
Lincoln's earliest recollections of his boyhood are from this farm. A son, Thomas Lincoln Jr., or Tommy, he was born in either 1812 or 1813, but died 3 days later. That's a Lincoln family trait, huh?
Right.
1815, a claimant in another land dispute sought to eject the Lincoln family from the Knob Creek farm.
Oh, my goodness.
Years later, after Lincoln became a national political figure, reporters and storytellers often exaggerated his family's poverty and the obscurity of his birth. Lincoln's family circumstances were not unusual for pioneer families at that time. Right? Everybody was struggling.
Right.
Freaking 1812.
Right, and you're now in the Midwest where it is not even sparsely populated.
Right.
Of the 816 and a half acres that Thomas held in Kentucky, he lost all but 200 acres in land disputes. Well, that's good.
208 acres.
That's plenty. Shit. Let's
By
get
1816, Thomas was frustrated over the lack of security provided by Kentucky courts. He sold the remaining land he held in Kentucky in 1814 and began planning to move to Indiana, where the land survey process was more reliable and the ability for an individual to retain land titles was more secure.
Right. Because in Kentucky, they're just handing land titles off to anybody. You just better hope nobody comes back.
Come and settle here. In 1860, Lincoln stated that the family's move to Indiana in 1816 was partly on account of slavery, but chiefly on the account of the difficulty in land titles in Kentucky. No, it was 100% because of the land titles in Kentucky.
You are not kidding. Historians, they support Lincoln's assertion that the two major reasons for the family's migration to Indiana were most likely due to the problem with securing land titles in Kentucky, and there is a small issue of owning people. In the Indiana Territory, once a part of the old Northwest Territory, the federal government owned the territorial land, which had been surveyed into sections to make it easier to describe in land claims.
Oh, no shit.
As a result, the survey method used in Indiana caused fewer ownership problems. Should be no ownership problems. And it helped Indiana attract new settlers.
I don't know why they weren't doing this in the first place in every state, because at this time, New York City's mapped out into like literal perfect squares over their blocks and streets and shit. Like they know how to map land.
Right. As a result, the survey method used in Indiana caused fewer ownership problems and helped Indiana attract new settlers. In addition, when Indiana became a state in December of 1816, the state constitution prohibited slavery as well as involuntary servitude. Although slaves with earlier indentures still resided within the state, illegal slavery ended within the first decade of statehood. Lincoln, he spent 14 of his formative years, or roughly 1/4 of his life, from the age of 7 to 21, in Indiana. In December of 1816, Thomas and Nancy Lincoln, 9-year-old daughter Sarah, 7-year-old Abe, they moved to Indiana. They settled on land in an unbroken forest. Hey, nobody got a deed on this son bitch.
Right, we're clearing the land our damn self.
Yeah, they settled land on an unbroken forest in Hurricane Township, Perry County, Indiana. The Lincoln property lay on land ceded to the United States government as part of treaties with Piankishaw, the Shawnee, and the Delaware people. They did that in 1804.
1818, the Indiana General Assembly created Spencer County, Indiana. That was from portions of Warwick and Perry counties, which included the Lincoln farm.
Oh.
The move to Indiana had been planned for at least several months. Thomas visited Indiana Territory in mid-1816. He wanted to go there to select a site, mark its claim, then returned to Kentucky and brought his family to Indiana sometime between November 11th and December 20th, 1816.
The worst time ever to travel in the Midwest.
Right.
It's insane.
However, Thomas did not begin the formal process to purchase 160 acres of land until October 15th, 1817.
Son of a bitch.
When he filed a claim at the land office in Vincennes, Indiana, for property identified as the southwest quarter of Section 32, Township 4 South, Range 5 West.
Fantastic.
At least he's got that, huh?
More recent scholarship on Thomas Lincoln has revised previous characterizations of him as a shiftless drifter.
Well, they did move a lot.
And he had to. Documentary evidence suggests he was a typical pioneer farmer of his time, obviously. He moved where it was.
Right.
The move to Indiana established his family in a state that prohibited slavery. And they lived in an area that yielded timber to construct a cabin, adequate soil to grow crops that fed the Hill's family, and water access to markets along the Ohio River.
He owned horses and livestock, paid taxes, acquired farmland, served the country when necessary, and maintained his standing in the local Baptist church.
He's a patriot.
Yeah. Despite some financial challenges, which involved relinquishing some acreage to pay for debts or to purchase other land, he obtained clear title to 80 acres of land in Spencer County June 5th, 1827.
Finally.
By 1830, before the family moved to Illinois, he's a drifter. Thomas had acquired 20 acres of land adjacent to his property, so now he's got a hundo.
Fantastic. Good for him, right? Lincoln, who became skilled with an axe, helped his father clear their Indiana land. Recalling his boyhood in Indiana, Lincoln remarked that from the time of his arrival in 1816, he was almost constantly handling that most useful instrument. Once the land had been cleared, the family raised hogs, and they also had corn on their farm, which was typical for Indiana settlers at this time. Thomas Lincoln also continued to work as a cabinet maker and a carpenter, which are both the same.
Had to do it all.
Cabinets are made of wood.
Right, but carpenters do everything.
With wood.
Well, right. But cabinet makers can only make cabinets, unless you want a house that looks like a cabinet.
That's a big-ass front door.
Gotta have mules to open the damn thing. Within a year of the family's arrival in Indiana, Thomas had claimed title to 160 acres of Indiana land and paid $80, which was a quarter of its total purchase price of $320. The Lincolns and others, many of whom came from Kentucky, they settled in what became known as the Little Pigeon Creek community. By the time Lincoln reached age 13, 9 families with 49 children, holy moly, under the age of 17 were living within a mile of the Lincoln homestead. All that area, and you guys are just like the guy that pees next to somebody in the urinal.
Right. They're like, dang, guys, come on. Jeez. Well, as it always happens in the Lincolns or around the Lincolns, tragedy struck the family. 5th of October, 1818. Nancy Lincoln died of milk sickness. This is an illness caused by drinking contaminated milk from cows who fed on Ageratina altissima, which is white snake root.
Yeah.
Abraham, 9 years old. Sister Sarah, 11.
9/11?
After Nancy's death, the household consisted of Thomas, age 40, Sarah, Abraham, and Dennis' friend Hanks. He was an orphan 19-year-old cousin of Nancy. Oh, poor Nancy. 1819, Thomas left Sarah, Abraham, and Dennis Hanks at the farm in Indiana and returned to Kentucky.
Is that I'm out?
So, yeah, you're good now.
Yeah.
How old is that?
I mean, the dude's 19, so...
Yeah, 20 now.
Right. December 2nd, 1819, Lincoln's father married Sarah Bush Johnson. They call her Sally. She was a widow with 3 children from Elizabethtown, Kentucky. 10-year-old Abe quickly bonded with his new stepmother,
I bet.
who raised her 2 young stepchildren as her own. Good for you. Describing her in 1860, Lincoln remarked that she was a good and kind mother to him. Sally encouraged Lincoln's eagerness to learn and desire to read and shared her own collection of books with him. Years later, she compared Lincoln to her own son, John D. Johnston. She said both were good boys, but I must say, both now being dead, that Abe was the best boy I ever saw or ever expect to see. Damn, throw her own biological son out under the bus. Damn, what you do, Johnny?
No, they're both dead, so that's why she said that, huh?
And plus, Lincoln's the freaking president.
All right. There was an interview with William Herndon following Lincoln's death in 1865. Sally Lincoln described her son as dutiful and kind, especially to animals and children.
Aww.
And very cooperative and uncomplaining, Abe was.
Honest Abe.
She also remembered him as a moderate eater who was not picky about what he ate and enjoyed good health.
Good for you.
I don't think he'd be picky about what you ate back then.
Yeah, it's corn.
All right. Pioneer era Indiana. They were hunting and fishing. It was very typical. Thomas and Abraham did not appear to have enjoyed them.
Oh, well, never mind. They didn't eat fish.
Right. Lincoln later admitted that he had shot and killed only a single wild turkey in his whole entire life.
Oh.
Apparently, he opposed killing animals, even for food, but occasionally participated in bear hunts when the bears threatened settlers' farms and communities. Oh, only when they're doing bad, you must kill the bastards, huh?
I mean, 1828, another tragedy struck the Lincoln family.
Oh, man.
Lincoln's older sister, Sarah, who had been married to Aaron Grigsby since August 2nd, 1826, She unfortunately died in childbirth, January 20th, 1828.
A lot back then.
She was almost 21.
Man.
Little is known about Nancy Hanks Lincoln or Abraham's sister.
Well,
That's his mom.
right.
Neighbors who were interviewed by William Herndon agreed that they were intelligent, but gave contradictory descriptions of their physical appearances.
Ooh,
Lincoln spoke very little about either woman.
right.
Herndon had to rely on testimony from a cousin, Dennis Hanks, to get an adequate description of Sarah. Those who knew Lincoln as a teenager later recalled as being deeply distraught by his sister's death,
Oh, I bet.
and an active participant in a feud with the Grigsby family that erupted afterwards. They're having like some dispute over where she should be buried or some shit like that. Or the child, I would assume. The child didn't die.
Possibly looking for a diversion from the sorrow of his sister's death. 19-year-old distraught Abe Lincoln made a flatboat trip to New Orleans.
New Orleans.
In the spring
Going
of-
down to New
right.
Orleans.
He did that in the spring of 1828. He had to get away from his troubles.
Yeah.
Lincoln and Allen Gentry, the son of James Gentry, owner of a local store near the Lincoln's family's homestead, they
He was
began their
friends with Montgomery.
right. They began their trip along the Ohio River at Gentry's Landing. Oh, look at that. That was near Rockport, Indiana. En route to Louisiana, Lincoln and Gentry, they were attacked by several African-American men who attempted to take their cargo, but the two successfully defended their boat and repelled their attackers.
Look at them. Upon their arrival in New Orleans, they sold their cargo, which was owned by Gentry's father, then explored the city. With its considerable slave presence and active slave market, it's probable that Lincoln witnessed a slave auction, I'm sure,
Oh, I bet.
and it may have left an indelible impression on him. Congress outlawed the importation of slaves in 1808, but the slave trade, obviously.
Right.
How much of New Orleans Lincoln saw or experienced is open to speculation. Whether he actually witnessed a slave auction at the time or on a later trip to New Orleans, his first visit to the Deep South exposed him to new experiences, including the cultural diversity of New Orleans and a return trip to Indiana aboard a steamboat.
Beautiful. Yeah, he had to go down there and see the Deep South. Oh, shit. By 1858, when responding to a questionnaire sent to former members of Congress, Lincoln described his education as defective. 1860, shortly after his nomination for president, Lincoln apologized for and regretted his limited formal education.
He didn't go to school at all.
I'm sorry, guys. Lincoln was self-educated. His formal schooling was intermittent, the aggregate of which may have amounted to less than 12 months. Wow, altogether his whole 18 years. He never attended college, but Lincoln retained a lifelong interest in learning. September of 1865, interview with William Herndon. Lincoln's stepmother described Abraham as a studious boy who read constantly, listened intently to others, had a deep interest in learning. Lincoln continued reading as a means of self-improvement as an adult, studying English grammar in his early 20s, and he mastered Euclid after he became a member of Congress. What's Euclid? Greek.
Ancient Greek mathematician.
Greek math?
Oh, he's a
Ooh.
mathematician guy. He's a
Wow.
geometer and a logician.
Wow.
He's the father of geometry.
Okay.
Dennis Hanks, cousin of Lincoln's mother, Nancy, he claimed that he gave Lincoln his first lesson in spelling, reading, and writing. He also boasted, I taught Abe to write with a buzzard's quill, which I killed with a rifle and having made a pen. Put Abe's hand in mine and moving his fingers by my hand to give him the idea of how to write.
Oh.
Hanks, who was 10 years older than Lincoln and only marginally literate, he may have helped Lincoln with his studies when he was very young, but Lincoln soon advances far beyond Hanks' abilities as a teacher.
Well, it happens.
Well, I mean, the teacher always outperforms the master at some point.
The student has become the teacher. Abraham, age 6, and his sister Sarah began their education in Kentucky, where they attended a subscription school about 2 miles north of their home on Knob Creek. Classes were held only a few months during the year. In December of 1816, they arrived in Indiana. There were no schools. So Abraham and his sister continued their studies at home until the first school at Little Pigeon Creek was established about 1819. And it was about a mile and a quarter south of the Lincoln farm.
He had to march a mile and a quarter to school every day in the snow.
Right.
Well, in the 1820s, educational opportunities for pioneer children, including Lincoln, were meager.
Oh.
Parents of school-age children paid for the community schools and its instructors. Yeah. During Indiana's pioneer era, Lincoln's limited formal schooling was not unusual, obviously. Lincoln was taught by itinerant teachers at blab schools, which were schools for younger students and paid by the students' parents. It's a private school. Oh. Because school resources were scarce, much of a child's education was informal and took place outside the confines of a classroom.
Usually happened a lot back then, unless you're in like New York or Philly or something. Family, neighbors, schoolmates of Lincoln's recall that he was an avid reader.
Yep. Guess what, guys? Lincoln read.
Right. Lincoln read Aesop Fables, the Bible, The Pilgrim's Progress, Robinson Crusoe, and Parson Weems' The Life of Washington. He also read newspapers, hymnals, songbooks, math books, spelling books, and other material.
And others.
I don't know what else there would be, like
I mean, geometry.
the farm equipment, log, manual thing.
Atlas.
Yeah.
Farmer's
Almanac, Guinness Book of World Record.
Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Right.
Mordecai's Believe It or Not.
Goosebumps.
Goose Pimples.
Right. Later studies included Shakespeare's works. He also did poetry, and he was very fond of British and American history.
Good for him.
Although Lincoln was unusually tall.
Oh, I mean, he had it easy. American history wasn't even 100 years old.
Right.
Bastard.
Although Lincoln was unusually tall, he was 6'3¼ and strong. He spent so much time reading that some neighbors thought he was lazy for all his reading, scribbling, writing, ciphering, writing poetry, etc. And they said Lincoln, he was only doing all that just to avoid strenuous manual labor. That lazy boy.
Well, his stepmother did acknowledge that he didn't enjoy physical labor, but loved to read. He read so much, was so studious, took so little physical exercise, was so laborious in his studies, that years later, when Lincoln lived in Illinois, Henry McHenry remembered that he became emaciated, and his best friends were afraid that he would craze himself.
Oh.
He just was reading.
Right. He's going crazy.
Lincoln also first began studying law during this time. His interest in the law having been piqued after being acquitted of a charge of operating a ferry boat without a license.
Ooh, he was like, that ain't never going to happen again. Right. Lincoln, he had been using a flatboat he had built to ferry passengers of steamboats on the Ohio River between Indiana and Kentucky when two brothers who operated a ferry boat from the Kentucky side accused him of infringing on their business. Lincoln, he was charged with operating a ferry boat without a license. A local justice of the peace, Squire Samuel Pate, he ruled in Lincoln's favor.
Hey, look at that.
After the case was over, Lincoln, he conversed extensively with Pate,
What are you going to say?
who told him of the difficulties arising with ignorance of the law and that every man would be a better and more useful citizen if he knew the law which he lived under.
Wow, no judge or anything would tell you that nowadays.
Right.
They don't want you to know the law.
Right. And if you're going to have a business, you better know that law of what the business that you own.
Especially. Well, Lincoln asked numerous questions about law and court procedure. At Pate's invitation, Lincoln returned several times to observe Pate hold in court.
Oh.
He subsequently began reading the revised statutes of Indiana. The volume Lincoln read was owned by his friend David Turnham, who was an Indiana constable.
Ooh.
As an officer of the law, Turnham was required to keep the book for ready reference and could not loan it, so Lincoln repeatedly visited his home to read it.
Right.
Turnham recalled that he would come to my house and sit and read it. It was the first law book he ever saw. His mother Sally and cousin Dennis also recalled that he thoroughly studied the book. Okay, guys.
He took particular interest in the historic documents in the book, such as the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, the Constitution of Indiana. In addition, Lincoln attended court sessions in Boonville, Rockport, and Princeton. As well as reading, Lincoln cultivated other skills and interests during his youth in Kentucky and Indiana. He developed a plain, backwoods style of speaking, which he practiced during his youth by telling stories and sermons to his family, schoolmates, and members of the local community. By the very time that he was 21, Lincoln had become an able and eloquent orator, quote unquote, somebody said. However, some historians have argued his speaking style, figures of speech, and vocabulary remained unrefined, even as he entered national politics. I mean, he's still going to have that little twang.
Right. 1830, when he was 21, 13 members of the extended Lincoln family moved to Illinois. Thomas, Sally, Abraham, Sally's son, John. They went as one family. I would hope so.
Right.
Dennis Hanks and his wife Elizabeth, who was also Abraham's stepsister, and their 4 children, they joined the party as well.
Fantastic.
Hank's half-brother, Squire Hall, along with his wife Matilda Johnston, another of Lincoln's stepsisters, and their son, they formed the third family group.
Okay.
Historians disagree on who initiated the move, but it may have been Dennis Hanks rather than Thomas Lincoln.
Well, Thomas had no obvious reason to even leave Indiana. He owned land, respected member of his community. But Hanks, on the other hand, he did not fare as well as old Thomas. In addition to John Hanks, one of Dennis's cousins lived in Macon County, Illinois. Dennis later remarked that Sally refused to part with her daughter, Elizabeth, so Sally may have persuaded Thomas to move to Illinois. Oh.
Yeah. The Lincolns, Hanks, Hall's family, they departed Indiana in early March 1830. As generally agreed, they crossed the Wabash River in Vincennes, Indiana, into Illinois, and the family settled on a site selected in Macon County, which was 10 miles west of Decatur. Oh. Lincoln, who was 21 years old at the time, helped his father build a log cabin and fences. He cleared 10 acres, and they put in a crop of corn.
Fantastic.
That autumn, the entire family fell ill with a fever, but all survived.
Holy shit.
The early winter of 1831 was especially brutal, with many locals calling it the worst they've ever experienced. In Illinois, it was known as the Winter of Deep Snow.
Damn.
In the spring, the Lincoln family prepared to move to a homestead in Coles County. Lincoln, he was ready to strike it out on his own.
Right. He's like, I've got to go.
Thomas and Sally, they moved to Coles County and remained in Illinois for the rest of their lives.
About time, Thomas. Shit.
Right, jeez, stay down.
Right. Although Sally Lincoln and his cousin, Dennis Hanks, maintained that Thomas loved and supported old Abe, the father-son relationship became strained after the family moved to Illinois.
Well, Abe's ready to go, and
Right.
the Thomas guy's like, we need you here, man.
Well, perhaps Thomas did not fully appreciate his son's ambition, while Abraham never knew of Thomas's early struggles.
Well, you got to communicate, guys.
1851, after the move to Illinois, Abe, he refused to visit his dying daddy and failed to take his own sons to visit their grandparents.
Oh.
Wow. Historian Rodney O. Davis has argued that the reason for the strain in the relationship was due to Lincoln's success as a lawyer and his marriage to Mary Todd Lincoln, who came from a wealthy, aristocratic family, and the two men no longer related to each other's circumstances in life. You looking down on me, boy?
Right.
Yes, I'm taller.
Lincoln, along with John Johnson and John Hanks, they accepted an offer from Denton Offutt to meet in Springfield and take a load of cargo to New Orleans in 1831. He's heading back to New Orleans. They departed from Springfield in late April or early May, and they did that along the Sangamon River. The boat had difficulty getting past a mill dam 20 miles northwest of Springfield near the village of New Salem. Offutt, who was impressed by New Salem's location and believed that steamboats could navigate the river to the village, made arrangements to rent the mill and open a general store.
Fantastic.
He then hired Lincoln as his clerk, and the two men returned to New Salem after they discharged their cargo in New Orleans. So we got a new business, boys.
When Lincoln returned to New Salem, late July 1831, he found a promising community, but it probably never had a population that exceeded 100 residents.
That's fine. That's all you need.
New Salem, small commercial settlement, served several local communities. The village had a sawmill, a grist mill, blacksmith shop, cooper's shop, wool carding shop, a hat maker, a general store, and a tavern that spread out over more than a dozen buildings. Oh, that's cool. It's decent.
Well, soon after he moved to New Salem, Lincoln met Anne Rutledge. Historians, they don't agree on the significance or nature of the relationship, but according to many, she was his first and perhaps most passionate love. At first, they were probably just close friends, but soon they had reached an understanding that they would be married as soon as Anne had completed her studies at the Female Academy in Jacksonville. Their plans were cut short in the summer of 1835 when it was probably typhoid fever hit New Salem. Anne, she died August 25th, 1835, and Lincoln went through a period of extreme melancholy that lasted for months.
Son of a bitch.
Historians have suggested that Lincoln's decision to study law may have also been tied to his interest in attracting Anne Rutledge.
Offutt, he did not open his store until September, so Lincoln found temporary work in the interim, and it was quickly accepted by the townspeople as a hard-working and cooperative young man.
Yeah, take that, bitches in Illinois and Indiana.
Yeah, sons of bitches. Once Lincoln began working in the store, he met a rougher crowd of settlers and workers from the surrounding communities who came into New Salem to purchase supplies or have their corn ground. Lincoln's humor, storytelling abilities, and physical strength fit the young, raucous element. During his first winter in New Salem, Lincoln attended a meeting of the New Salem Debating Club.
Oh, here we go. His performance there, along with his efficiency in managing the store, sawmill, and gristmill, in addition to his other efforts as self-improvement, soon gained the attention of the town's leaders, such as Dr. John Allen, Mentor Graham, and James Rutledge. Ooh. The men encouraged Lincoln to enter politics, feeling that he was capable of supporting the interests of their community. March of 1832, Lincoln announced his candidacy in a written article that appeared in the Sangamo Journal, which was published in Springfield.
Lincoln, he admired Henry Clay and his American system. The national political climate was undergoing a change. Local Illinois issues were the primary political concerns of the election. Lincoln opposed the development of a local railroad project, but he supported improvements in the Sangamon River that would increase its navigability Yeah, when you put the railroads there, it just decimates a town.
Yeah, unless it's going through the town.
Right. Although the two-party political system that pitted Democrats against Whigs had not yet formed, Lincoln, he would become one of the leading Whigs in the state legislature within the next few years.
By the spring of 1832, office business had failed, and Lincoln was out of work. Around this time, the Blackhawk War erupted, and Lincoln joined a group of volunteers from New Salem to repel Blackhawk, who was leading a group of 450 warriors, along with 1,500 women and children. They wanted to reclaim traditional tribal lands in Illinois.
Wow.
Lincoln was elected as captain of his unit, but he and his men never saw combat. Lincoln later commented in the late 1850s that the selection by his peers was a success which gave me more pleasure than any I've had since.
Oh.
Lincoln returned to central Illinois after a few months of militia service to campaign in Sangamon County before the August 6th legislative election. When the votes were tallied, Lincoln finished 8 out of 13 candidates.
Wow.
Only the top 4 candidates were elected, but Lincoln managed to somehow secure 277 out of the 300 votes cast in New Salem.
Damn.
Without a job, Lincoln and William Berry, who was a member of Lincoln's militia company during the Blackhawk War, they purchased one of the 3 general stores in New Salem, which they called the Lincoln Berry General Store.
Fantastic.
Good for them. No, not out of job no more.
Right. The two men, they signed personal notes to purchase the business and a later acquisition of another store's inventory. Oh, nice. But their enterprise failed. 1833, New Salem was no longer a growing community. Sangamon River proved to be inadequate for commercial transportation. No roads or railroads allowed easy access to other markets either.
Well, guess what, Lincoln? You shouldn't oppose the railroad then.
In January, Berry applied for a liquor license, but the added revenue was not enough to save the business. With the closure of the Lincoln Berry store, Lincoln, once again, unemployed. And guess what? It's time to leave New Salem.
May 1833, with the assistance of friends interested in keeping him in New Salem, Lincoln secured an appointment from President Andrew Jackson as the postmaster of New Salem, a position he kept for 3 years. During this time, he earned about $150 to $175 as postmaster, hardly enough to be considered a full-time source of income. Another friend helped Lincoln obtain an appointment as an assistant to county surveyor John Calhoun, who was a Democratic political appointee. Lincoln had no experience at surveying, but he relied on, well, you should have experience and make it your life's work since you got screwed out of everything.
You ain't kidding.
He relied on borrowed copies of 2 works and was able to teach himself the practical application of surveying techniques, as well as the trigonometric basis of the process. All right. His income proved sufficient to meet his day-to-day expenses.
Oh, that's nice.
But the notes from his partnership with Berry were coming due.
Yes,
I got to pay that off.
Well, it was either 1833 or 1834. Lincoln, he met Mary Owens, the sister of his friend Elizabeth Abel. She was visiting from her home in Kentucky. 1836, in a conversation with Elizabeth, Lincoln agreed to court Mary if she ever returned to New Salem. I like how they do that. She comes back, yeah, sure, why not?
Right, whatever.
Send her my way. Mary returned in November of 1836, and Lincoln courted her for a time, but they had second thoughts about the relationship and it didn't work out. 16th of August, 1837, Lincoln wrote Mary a letter from Springfield suggesting to end the relationship. She never replied, and the courtship was over.
Well, go back to 1834. Lincoln's decision to run for the state legislature for a second time was strongly influenced by his need to satisfy his debts, what he jokingly referred to as his national debt, and the additional income that would come from a legislative salary.
Okay.
By this time, he was a member of the Whig Party. His campaign strategy excluded a discussion of the national issues and concentrated on traveling throughout the district and greeting voters.
All right.
The district's leading Whig candidate was Springfield attorney John Todd Stewart, whom Lincoln knew from his militia service during the Blackhawk War.
Local Democrats feared Stewart more than Lincoln, offered to withdraw 2 of their candidates from the field of 13, where only the top 4 vote-getters would be elected, and they did that to support Lincoln. Well, that's nice of them,
He
right?
said, how about get out of the Whig Party, come to the Democrats, and we'll get you up there.
Stewart, who was confident of his own victory, told Lincoln to go ahead and accept the Democrats' endorsement. 4th of August, Lincoln polled 1,376 votes, the second highest number of votes in the race. And he won one of the 4 seats in the election, as did Stewart.
Well, good for you, buddy.
Lincoln, he was reelected to the state legislature in 1836, 1838, and 1840.
Well, Stewart, who was a cousin of Lincoln's future wife, Mary Todd, was impressed with Lincoln and encouraged him to study law. Lincoln was probably familiar with courtrooms from an early age. While the family was still in Kentucky, his father, yes, we know the land deeds. We know that while the family was still in Kentucky, his father was frequently involved in filing land deeds, serving on juries, and attending sheriff's sales. And later, Lincoln may have been aware of his own father's legal issues.
Yeah, since they had to move every frickin' year and a half because somebody was like, you're on my land. It's like when you're sitting in a seat. Excuse me. You're in my seat.
Well, I got the ticket here that says it's mine.
Well, you haven't been here for the first 2 quarters.
When the family moved to Indiana, Lincoln lived within 15 miles of 3 county courthouses.
Damn.
Okay. Attracted by the opportunity of hearing a good oral presentation, as many others did on the frontier, he attended court sessions as a spectator. Why not? You got nothing else going on.
The practice continued when he moved to New Salem. Noticing how often lawyers referred to them, Lincoln made a point of reading and studying the revised statutes of Indiana, the Declaration of Independence, and, guessed it, the United States Constitution, which I wish politicians read today.
Right.
New Salem residents recalled Lincoln reading law books in 1831 or 1832.
One of those years he did it, I swear.
Lincoln biographer Douglas L. Wilson considers this reading to have been exploratory. Lincoln wrote that he began studying law in earnest after the election of 1834. Well, you're in the state legislature, bud.
Right. Well, using books borrowed from the law firm of Stewart and Judge Thomas Drummond, Lincoln began to study law in earnest during the first half of 1835. He did not attend law school and stated, "I studied with nobody."
Oh, but that's how he always learned everything, huh?
At the time, the predominant method of legal education was to read law as an apprentice in a law office.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to college.
Right.
Although he was never a formal apprentice, Lincoln may have been mentored by Stewart in his law studies. New Salem resident William Green, he stated that Stewart gave Lincoln many explanations and elucidations of law. As part of his training, he read copies of Blackstone's Commentaries, Chitty's Pleadings, Greenleaf's Evidence, and Joseph Story's Equity Jurisprudence.
Okay, so
I guess those are meaningful.
Right. He also likely read Kent's Commentaries on American Law. February 1836, Lincoln stopped working as a surveyor. March 1836, he took the first step to becoming a practicing attorney when he applied to the clerk of the Sangamon County Court to register as a man of good and moral character. Look at that. After passing an oral examination by a panel of practicing attorneys, O. Abe received his law license on the 9th of September, 1836. April 1837, he was enrolled to practice before the Supreme Court, Illinois, and he moved to Springfield, where he went into partnership with Stewart once again.
Got their own law firm. Lincoln's first session in the Illinois legislature ran from December 1st, 1834 to February 13th, 1835. In preparation for the session, Lincoln borrowed $200 from Coleman Smoot, who was one of the richest men in Sangamon County, and spent $60 of it on his first suit of clothes.
Nice.
As the second youngest legislature in this term and one of the 36 first-time attendees, Lincoln was primarily an observer, but his colleagues soon recognized his mastery of the technical language of the law and asked him to draft bills for them.
Nice. Look at Lincoln.
Good for you, bud.
Good for this guy. Well, Lincoln announced his bid for re-election. 1836 of June, he addressed the controversial issue of expanded suffrage. Democrats advocated universal suffrage for white males residing in the state for at least 6 months. They hoped to bring Irish immigrants who were attracted to the state because of its canal projects onto the voting rolls as Democrats as well.
Of course.
Abe supported the traditional Whig position that voting should be limited to property owners. Lincoln, he was reelected on the 1st of August, 1836, as the top vote getter this time in the Sangamon delegation. Look at him, top vote getter.
Well, this delegation of 2 senators and 7 representatives was nicknamed the Long Nine because of all of them were above average height.
Oh.
Despite being the second youngest of the group, Lincoln was viewed as the group's leader and the floor leader of the Whig minority.
Wow.
The Long Nine's primary agenda was the relocation of the state capital from Vandalia to Springfield and a vigorous program of internal improvements for the state. Lincoln's influence within the legislature and within his party continued to grow with his reelection for 38 and 40.
Nice. Look at this guy. By the 1838-39 legislative session, Lincoln, he served on at least 14 committees, worked behind the scenes to manage the program of the Whig minority. While serving as a state legislator, Illinois Auditor James Shields, he challenged Lincoln to a duel.
Oh, damn. Why?
Wow. Lincoln had published an inflammatory letter in the Sangamon Journal, a Springfield newspaper, that poked fun at Shields. Lincoln's future wife, Mary Todd, and her close friend, they continued writing letters about Shields without Lincoln's knowledge. Shields took offense to the articles and demanded satisfaction.
Oh, geez, so Mary Todd and her little friend are just out there fanning the flames.
Almost got old Abe murdered.
The incident escalated to the 2 parties meeting on Missouri's Sunflower Island near Alton, Illinois, to participate in a duel, which was illegal in Illinois.
Right.
Lincoln took responsibility for the articles and accepted.
Wow.
Lincoln chose cavalry broadswords as the duel's weapons because Shields was known as an excellent marksman.
Right.
Ah, there you go, bud. Just prior to engaging in combat, Lincoln demonstrated his physical advantage, which was his long arm reach, by easily cutting a branch above Shields' head. Their seconds, who are the guys that are with him, they intervened and convinced the men to cease hostilities on the grounds that Lincoln had not written the letters.
Right there, he's seeing what was about to happen there. They're like, Illinois governor called for a special legislative session.
Why is that not talked about more?
Right.
Lincoln just getting into a duel
Right.
with freaking swords, dude.
Right. Wow. The Illinois governor, he called for a special legislative session during the winter of 1835 and early 1836. He did that in order to finance what became known as the most popular canal ever, the Illinois and Michigan Canal.
Yep.
Which connected the Illinois and Chicago rivers and linked Lake Michigan to the Mississippi River.
Right.
The proposal would allow the state government to finance the construction.
Why that has anything to do with Michigan, I don't know. But
Right. The proposal would allow the state government to finance the construction with a $500,000 loan.
that's a lot of money.
Lincoln, he's like, you know what? I'm voting in favor, which passed 28 to 27.
Look at you, Lincoln, decide and vote, huh?
Yeah, I was too. Wow.
Lincoln had always supported Henry Clay's vision of the American system, which saw a prosperous America supported by a well-developed network of roads, canals, and later railroads.
Wait, is that Henry Clay Ford?
No, just Henry Clay. Lincoln favored raising the funds for these projects through the federal government's sale of public lands to eliminate interest expenses.
Nice.
Otherwise, private capital should bear the cost alone.
Right.
Fearing that Illinois would fall behind the other states in economic development, he shifted his position to allow the state to provide the necessary support for private developers.
Okay,
I mean, if you want to get shit done, you got to get it done somehow.
Right. Well, in the very next session, a newly elected legislator, Stephen A. Douglas, he went even further and proposed a comprehensive $10 million state loan program. It was like, what? There's that much money?
Right. That exists?
And Lincoln was like, you know what? I'll support that as well. However, the Panic of 1837 effectively destroyed the possibility of more internal improvements in Illinois. The state became littered with unfinished roads and partially dug canals. The values of the state's bonds fell dramatically, and interest on the state's debts were 8 times its total revenue.
Damn.
The state government took 40 years to pay off this very debt.
Lincoln had a couple ideas to salvage the internal improvements program. First, he proposed that the state buy public lands at a discount from federal government and then sell them to new settlers at a profit.
Yeah.
But the federal government rejected the idea. They're like, no, we'll sell them at a profit.
Right.
Next, he proposed a graduated land tax that would have passed more of the tax burden to the owners of the most valuable land, but the majority of the legislators were unwilling to commit any further state funds to internal improvement projects.
Okay.
The state's financial depression continued through 1839.
1830s, Illinois welcomed more immigrants.
What is Chicago doing? They're not making no money for the damn state or what?
I don't know, but they welcome immigrants from New York and New England who tended to move into the northern and central parts of the state. Vandalia, which was located in the more stagnant southern section, seemed unsuitable as a state seat of government. On the other hand, Springfield and Sangamon County was strategically located in central Illinois and was already growing in population and refinement. Those who opposed the relocation of the state government to Springfield first attempted to weaken the Sangamon County delegation's influence by dividing the county onto 2 new counties.
Oh.
But
So they've been doing some sketchy shit forever, man.
it's the Democrats, man. But old Abe, he was instrumental in first amending and then killing this proposal in his own committee. Look at that.
All right, throughout the lengthy debate, Lincoln's political skills were repeatedly tested. He finally succeeded when the legislature accepted his proposal that the chosen city would be required to contribute $50,000 plus 2 acres of land for construction of a new state capitol building.
Oh.
Only Springfield could comfortably meet his financial demand.
Damn.
The final action was tabled twice, but Lincoln resurrected it by finding acceptable amendments to draw additional support, including one that would have allowed reconsideration into the next session.
Fantastic. As the other locations were voted down, Springfield selected by 46 to 37 vote on 28th February 1837. Under Abe's leadership, reconsideration efforts were defeated in the 1830-1839 sessions. Orville Browning, who would later become a close Lincoln friend and confidant, guided the legislation through the Illinois Senate, and the move became effective in the year of 1839.
Look at Lincoln getting shit done. Mm-hmm. Well, Lincoln, like Henry Clay, favored federal control over the nation's banking system. Ooh. But President Jackson had effectively killed the Bank of the United States by 1835. Same year, Lincoln crossed party lines to vote with pro-bank Democrats in chartering the Illinois State Bank. As he did in the internal improvements debates, Lincoln searched for the best available alternative. According to historian and Lincoln biographer Richard Carradine, Lincoln felt that a well-regulated bank would provide a sound, elastic currency, protect the public against the extreme prescriptions of the hard money men on one side and the paper inflationists on the other. It would be a safe depository for public funds and provide the credit mechanisms needed to sustain state improvements. He said it would also bring to an end the extortionate money lending.
That's true.
Opponents of the state bank initiated an investigation designed to close the bank in the 36-37 legislative session. But not so fast.
Okay. Well, that makes a little bit of sense there, but 11th of January, 1837, Abe made his first major legislative speech supporting the bank and attacking its opponents. He condemned that lawless and mobocratic spirit which already abroad in the land and is spreading with rapid and fearful impetuosity to the ultimate overthrow of every institution or even moral principle in which persons and property have hitherto found security. And he's like, this shit's serious. Blaming the opposition entirely on the political class, Lincoln called politicians at least one long step removed from the honest men.
It's not lying about that. Honest Abe.
All right. Well, he also commented, I make the assertion boldly and without fear of contradiction that no man who does not hold an office or does not aspire to one has ever found any fault of the bank. It has doubled the prices of the products of their farms and filled their pockets with a sound circulating medium, and they are all well pleased with its operations.
Well, that was then.
Right.
Westerners in the Jacksonian era, which is President Andrew Jackson, they were generally skeptical of all banks.
Right.
And this was aggravated after the Panic of 1837 when the Illinois Bank suspended specie payments.
Ooh.
What are those? Made in coin or bullion rather than paper.
Oh.
They suspended specie payments, which are coins or bullion, in favor of paper money. Lincoln still defended the bank, but it was too strongly linked to a failing credit system that led to devalued currency and loan foreclosures to generate much political support.
Makes sense.
1839, Democrats led another investigation of the state bank with Lincoln as a Whig representative on the investigating committee.
Oh.
Wow. You got to have impartial voices.
Yeah. Lincoln was instrumental in the committee's conclusion that the suspension of the specie payments was related to the uncontrollable economic conditions rather than any organic defects of the institutions themselves. However, though, the legislation allowed the suspension of the specie payments. It was set to expire at the end of December of 1840 anyhow, and Democrats wanted to adjourn without further extensions.
They're like, we're going to let it run out.
Yeah.
In an attempt to avoid a quorum on adjournment, Lincoln and several others jumped out of a first-story window.
Whoa!
But the speaker counted them as present, and the bank was killed. Oh, damn, they said, we're not here.
Fantastic.
Jeez. By 1841, Lincoln was less supportive of the state bank.
I bet so.
Although he would continue to make speeches around the state supporting it. He concluded, if there was to be this continual warfare against the institutions of the state, the sooner it was brought to an end, the better.
Yeah.
I guess.
Right.
He's saying, let's just put the shit to bed, man.
Right. Well, in the 1830s, the slaveholding states began to take notice of the growth of the anti-slavery rhetoric in the North. In particular, they were outraged by the American Anti-Slavery Society's pamphlets depicting slave owners as cruel brutes. Non-slave states sometimes also opposed abolitionism. In January of 1837, the Illinois legislature passed a resolution declaring that they highly disapprove of the formation of abolition societies. Oh. And that the right of property in slaves is sacred to the slaveholding states by the federal government. And that they cannot be deprived of that right without their consent. And they also stated that the general government cannot abolish slavery in the District of Columbia against the will of the citizens of that said district. Wow. Look at these guys.
The vote in the Illinois Senate was 18-0 and 77-6 in the House, with Lincoln and Dan Stone, who was also from Sangamon County, voted in opposition.
Okay.
Because relocation of the state capital was still the number one issue on the two men's agendas, they made no comment on their votes until the relocation was approved.
All right.
On March 3rd, with his other legislative priorities behind him, Lincoln filed a formal written protest with the legislature that stated, the institution of slavery is founded on both injustice and bad policy.
Okay. There it goes. Lincoln, he criticized abolitionists on practical grounds, arguing that the promulgation of abolition doctrines tends rather to increase than to abate its slavery's evils.
Sort of like, if you tell me not to do something, I'm going to do it anyway.
Right. He also addressed the issue of slavery in the nation's capital in a different manner from the resolutions, and he wrote this. The Congress of the United States has the power, under the Constitution to abolish slavery in the District of Columbia. But that power ought not to be exercised unless at the request of the people of that said district.
All right.
And Nicolay and Hayes, Abraham Lincoln, A History, Volume 1. The editor stated that the protest briefly defined his position on the slavery question, and so far as it goes, it was then the same as it is now.
Lincoln's address to the Young Men's Lyceum of Springfield, January 27, 1833, was titled The Perpetuation of Our Political Institutions. In this speech, Lincoln described the dangers of slavery in the United States, an institution he believed would corrupt the federal government. Yet he believed that, although bad laws, if they exist, should be replaced as soon as possible, still, while they continue in force for the sake of example, they should be religiously observed.
Obviously. Otherwise, your new laws that you make.
Saying even if it's a bad law, until we can get it replaced for something other, you got to obey the law, man.
Right. 1837, from the start of the law partnership with Stewart, Old Abe handled most of the firm's clients, while Stewart was primarily concerned with politics and election to the United States House of Reps.
Yeah, it's good. He gets elected to there, then their law firm would boom, wouldn't it?
You think the law practice has as many clients as it could handle. Most fees were $5, with the common fee ranging between $2.50 and $10. Lincoln quickly realized that he was equal in ability and effectiveness to most other attorneys. Whether they were self-taught like Lincoln or had studied with a more experienced lawyer. Following Stewart's elected to Congress in November 1839, Lincoln, he ran the practice on his own. Lincoln, like Stewart, he considered his legal career as simply a catalyst for his political ambitions. I mean, it's a stepping stone, baby.
Well, in 1839, Mary Todd, she moved from her family's home in Lexington, Kentucky, to Springfield, which was the home of her eldest sister, Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's husband, Ninian Edwards.
Oh.
He was the son of Ninian Edwards.
Oh, fantastic.
Where are you, buddy?
Who's this guy?
Ninian Edwards was a political figure who was prominent in Illinois. He was the first and only governor of the Illinois Territory.
Fantastic.
All right. Well,
Born
good
in
for you.
Maryland.
Damn, so she got some, her family's pretty powerful then, huh? Mary was popular in the Springfield social scene, but soon was attracted to Lincoln. Sometime in 1840, the two became engaged. They initially set a January 1st, 1841 wedding date, but mutually called it off. During the break in their courtship, Lincoln briefly courted Sarah Rickard, Rickard, whom he had known since 1837.
Okay.
He proposed marriage to Sarah in 1841, but was rejected.
Oh.
Sarah later said that his peculiar manner and his general deportment would not be likely to fascinate a young girl just entering the society world.
Oh, wow. It's like he's way too old. He's way too old.
Plus, she's a snob.
Right.
Clearly.
Lincoln, he still had conflicted feelings concerning Mary Todd. Well, sure he did. He just got rejected.
Right. Like, damn, should I go back to her?
Right. August 1841, he visited Joshua Speed, his close friend and former roommate, who had moved to Louisville. Lincoln met Speed's fiancée while there, and after his return to Springfield, Speed and Lincoln corresponded over Speed's own doubts about marriage.
Oh.
Lincoln advised Speed that helped convince him to proceed with the marriage. He's like, don't give up, bud. In turn, Speed urged Lincoln to do the same. He's like, well, if I got to
do it, you're going to be tied down, too.
why don't you get married? Lincoln resumed his courtship with Mary, and on the 4th of November, 1842, they were married at the Edwards' home. Oh. In a letter written a few days after the wedding, Lincoln wrote, "Nothing new here except my marrying, which to me is a matter of profound wonder."
It's like, why did I do it?
Like, what the hell is that?
The couple had 4 sons. Robert Todd Lincoln. He was born in Springfield on August 1st, 1843. He was their only child to survive into adulthood. The other Lincoln sons were born in Springfield and died either during childhood or their teen years. Edward Baker Lincoln, he was born March 10th, 1846, died February 1st, 1850 in Springfield. Wow. William Wallace Lincoln, born December 21st, 1850, died February 20th, 1862.
In the White House.
In the White House during Lincoln's first term, which was from typhoid.
Yeah, that's when Mary Todd started going insane.
Well, Thomas Tad Lincoln, he was born April 4th, 1853, and died July 16th, 1871.
18?
He died in Chicago. During the American Civil War, 4 of Mary Todd Lincoln's brothers fought for the Confederacy, with 1 wounded and another killed. Lieutenant David Todd, Mary's half-brother, served as commandant of the Libby prison. Oh, geez. Libby prison camp during the war. Jeez.
Wow. By 1840, Lincoln was drawing one.
How'd she feel about it?
Right.
About slavery and stuff.
That's right. I liked it. By 1840, Lincoln was drawing $1,000 annually from the law practice, along with his salary as a legislator. However, when Stewart was reelected to Congress, Lincoln was no longer content to carry the entire load. April of 1841, he entered into a new partnership with Stephen T. Logan. Logan, he was 9 years older than Lincoln. He was the leading attorney in Sangamon County, also a former attorney in Kentucky before he moved to Illinois. Logan saw that Abe as a compliment to his practice, recognizing that Abe's effectiveness with juries was superior to his own in that area. Once again, clients were plentiful for the firm. Although Lincoln received 1/3 of the firm's proceeds rather than the even split he had enjoyed with Stewart.
That's fine.
Well, the other guy was like, dude, I'm
the best.
Well
Dude.
established.
Right. Lincoln's association with Logan was a learning experience. He absorbed from Logan some of the finer points of law and the importance of proper and detailed case research and preparation.
Fantastic.
Logan's written pleadings were precise and on point, and Lincoln used them as his model. However, much of Lincoln's development was still self-taught. I mean, we got to get that in there.
Right.
Historian David Herbert Donald, there's the old three-name guy.
Yeah.
He wrote that Logan taught him that there was more to law than common sense and simple equity.
Definitely right.
Lincoln's study began to focus on procedures and precedents instead.
There you go, bud. It's not what you can prove.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically
Not what you can
follow. It's not what you say; it's what you can prove.
What you can prove, Jake. Breaking news.
Yeah, basically, you gotta actually do law and
Right.
apply it to cases.
Right. During this time, Abe did not study law books, but he did spend night after night after night after night in the Supreme Court library, searching out precedents that applied to the cases he was working on. There you go, buddy. That's how you do it. Lincoln later on stated, "I love to dig up the question by the roots and hold it up and dry it before the fires of the mind." His written briefs, especially important Illinois Supreme Court cases, were prepared in great detail with precedents noted that often went back to the origins of the English common law. I mean, you got to. That's why you see shit. That's why you see shit nowadays. If there's like one word that's just wrong, it blows the whole thing out of the water. It's just crazy.
Well, Lincoln's growing skills became evident as his appearances before the Supreme Court increased and would serve him well into his political career. By the time he went to Washington in 1861, he had appeared over 300 times before this court.
Damn.
Lincoln biographer Stephen B. Oates, he wrote, "It was here that he earned his reputation as a lawyer's lawyer, adept at meticulous preparation and cogent argument."
Lincoln's partnership with Logan dissolved in the fall of 1844 when Logan entered into a partnership with his son.
Look at that.
Logan and Logan. Lincoln, who probably could have had his choice of more established attorneys, he was tired of being the junior partner and entered into a partnership with William Herndon,
Look at you, buddy.
who has been reading law in offices of Logan and Lincoln. Herndon, like Lincoln, was an active Whig, but the party in Illinois at the time was split into two factions. Lincoln, he was connected to the older, silk-stocking element of the party through his marriage to Mary Todd. Herndon, he was one of the leaders of the younger, more populist portion of the party. Oh, damn. So
You got both of them.
that's a good thing. Yeah?
All right. The Lincoln-Herndon partnership continued through Lincoln's presidential election.
Wow.
And Lincoln remained a partner of record until his death. Before his partnership with Herndon, Lincoln had not regularly attended court in neighboring communities. This changed as Lincoln became one of the most active regulars of the circuit court through 1854, interrupted only by his 2-year stint in Congress.
Wow.
The 8th Circuit covered 11,000 square miles. Each spring and fall, Lincoln traveled the district for 9 to 10 weeks at a time, netted around $150 for each 10-week circuit. On the road, lawyers and judges lived in cheap hotels with 2 layers to a bed.
Two lawyers.
Layers. Layers of lawyers. 2 layers of lawyers. With 2 lawyers to a bed and 6 or 8 men to a room.
Damn. Lincoln's reputation for integrity and fairness on the circuit, it led to him being in high demand, both from clients and local attorneys who needed assistance. It was during this very time, right in the circuit, that he picked up one of his lasting nicknames, Honest Abe.
Honest Abe.
The clients he represented, the men he rode the circuit with, the lawyers he met along the way, became as Lincoln's most loyal political supporters. One of these, David Davis, fellow Whig who, like Lincoln, promoted nationalist economic programs and opposed slavery without actually becoming an abolitionist.
He joined the circuit in 1848 as a judge and would occasionally appoint Lincoln to fill in for him. They traveled the circuit for 11 years. Lincoln would eventually appoint him to the United States Supreme Court. Well, look at that.
Wow.
Another close associate was Ward Hill Lamon. He was an attorney in Danville, Illinois. He was the only local attorney with whom Lincoln had a formal working agreement. He also accompanied Lincoln to Washington in 1861. Look at him taking all his cronies with him.
Right.
It's like the friendship version of nepotism. What is that called?
Oh, unlike other attorneys on the circuit, Lincoln did not supplement his income by engaging in real estate or operating a business or a farm. His income was generally what he earned practicing law. In the 1840s, this amounted to $1,500 to $2,500 a year, increasing to $3,000 in the early 1850s and $5,000 by the mid-1850s.
He was making well over $100,000 in today's money.
1850, the firm was involved in 18% of the cases on Sangamon Court. By 1853, it had grown to 33%. It was like anything's happening is going through Abe.
Jeez. On his return from a single term in the U.S. House of Representatives, Lincoln turned down an offer of a partnership in a Chicago law firm.
Yeah, he didn't want to go to Chicago.
Lincoln was also in demand on the federal courts and was a counsel in several important patent, railroad, and commerce cases before the Illinois Supreme Court and the Federal District Court in Chicago. Lincoln was involved in at least 2 cases involving slavery.
Oh.
1841, an Illinois Supreme Court case, Bailey versus Cromwell. Lincoln successfully prevented the sale of a woman who was alleged to be a slave, making the argument that in Illinois, the presumption of law was that every person was free without regard to color.
Oh, so there you go. That probably shouldn't have lasted long. 1847, Abraham Lincoln defended Robert Matson, a slave owner who was trying to retrieve his runaway slaves.
Look at that. He's on both sides.
Matson brought slaves from his Kentucky plantation to work on land he owned in Illinois, which I think was illegal. The slaves were represented by Orlando Ficklin, Usher Linder, and Charles H. Constable. The slaves ran away because they believed that once they were in Illinois, they were free, since the Northwest Ordinance forbade slavery in the territory that included Illinois. Well, though, in this case, Lincoln invoked the right of transit, which allows slaveholders to take their slaves temporarily into free territory. Hey, he bought this land. He has workers coming up, get it worked up, as long as he takes them back
in a timely manner.
He's good to go.
Well, Lincoln also stressed that Matson did not intend to have the slaves remain permanently in Illinois.
There you go.
Even with these arguments, judges in Coles County ruled against Lincoln, and the slaves set free.
Wow.
Donald notes, neither the Matson case nor the Cromwell case should be taken as an indication of Lincoln's views on slavery. His business was law, not morality.
Exactly.
The right of transit was a legal theory recognized by some of the free states that a slave owner, like I said, could take slaves into a free state and retain ownership as long as the intent was to take them back where they were.
Right.
Like you said, taking them, I need some shit picked or farmed land, and we're going to put them back.
Railroads. We all know about railroads. They became a very important economic force in Illinois in the 1850s. As they expanded, they created myriad legal issues regarding charters and franchises, problems relating to right-of-way, problems concerning evaluation and taxation, problems relating to the duties of common carriers, and problems with the right of passengers, problems concerning merger, consolidation, and receivership.
So the railroad industry was just one big problem.
Right. Lincoln and other attorneys, they would soon find that the old railroad litigation was a major source of income.
Yeah, I bet.
Like the slave cases, sometimes Lincoln would represent the railroads, and sometimes he would represent their adversaries.
Who's ever paying me, dude?
Right. He had no legal or political agenda that was reflected in his choice of clients. Herndon referred to Lincoln as purely and entirely a case lawyer. Whatever ones he thinks he can win.
Right. And one on...
Or he thinks is right.
Or thinks he can win, probably. In one notable case, in 1851, Lincoln represented the Alton and Sangamon Railroad. They were in a dispute with James Barrett, who was a shareholder. Barrett refused to pay the balance on his pledge to the railroad on the grounds that it had changed its originally planned route. Lincoln argued that as a matter of law, a corporation is not bound by its original charter when that charter can be amended in the public interest.
That makes sense.
Card subject to change, baby. Lincoln, he also argued that the newer route proposed by Alton and Sangamon was superior and less expensive, and accordingly, the corporation had a right to sue Barrett for his delinquent payment.
I bet you Barrett had something going on with one of the cities it was supposed to pass through.
Maybe. It was supposed to go by Riverdale or some shit, and it said, no, we're going to pass Riverdale.
Sons of bitches. Lincoln, he won this case, and the Illinois Supreme Court decision was eventually cited by other U.S. courts. The most important civil case for Lincoln was the landmark Heard versus Rock Island Bridge Company, also known as the Effie Afton case. America's expansion west, which Lincoln strongly supported, as he should, was seen as an economic threat to the river trade. Yeah, because
they don't go over there.
Right. Which ran north to south, primarily along the Mississippi. 1856, a steamboat collided with a bridge built by the Rock Island Railroad between Rock Island, Illinois, and Davenport, Iowa.
It was the first railroad bridge to span the Mississippi. The steamboat owner sued for damages, claiming the bridge was a hazard to navigation, but Lincoln argued in court for the railroad and won, removing a costly impediment to western expansion by establishing the right of land routes to bridge waterways. Criminal law made up a small part of Lincoln and Herndon's casework. Possibly the most notable criminal trial of Lincoln's career as a lawyer, it came in 1858 when he defended the son of Lincoln's friend Jack Armstrong. William Duff Armstrong, he had been charged with murder.
Ooh, not murder. Damn. The case became very famous for Lincoln's use of judicial notice, a rare tactic at that time. He did that to show that an eyewitness had lied on the stand. Oh, how do you do that? As a rule of law, evidence that allows a fact to be introduced into evidence if the truth of that fact is so notorious or well known that it can reasonably be doubted. Okay.
Right, so if somebody lied on the stand, but it's known out there that it's a lie, then you can bring it in, and nobody else did that for some reason. Why is it rare? Nope, we're not letting that slide in this court.
Wow. Well, the witness testified to having seen the crime by moonlight. Lincoln produced a farmer's almanac to show that the moon on that date was at such a low angle, it could not even have provided enough illumination to see anything clearly.
Damn.
There are no street lights. There's no moonlight. Oh,
that's crazy.
It was a dark alley. Based almost entirely on this evidence, Armstrong acquitted.
That's crazy.
I mean, what else can you do? A story arose many years later that Lincoln had modified the almanac, but this was refuted by Abram Bergen, who had witnessed the trial as a young attorney and later served as a justice of the New Mexico Territorial Supreme Court.
Well, from his recollection, the prosecution had objected upon Lincoln's demonstration from the almanac and compared it to an almanac in their possession, only to find that Lincoln's was genuine.
Damn right.
Right, because there would be no more almanacs floating around. Lincoln was involved in more than 5,100 cases in Illinois alone during his 23-year legal career.
Damn.
Though many of these cases involved little more than filing a writ, others were more substantial and quite involved.
Okay.
Lincoln and his partners appeared before the Illinois Supreme Court more than 400 times.
Damn. Look at this guy. Abraham is the only United States president to have been awarded a patent for an invention.
Look at this. He's a lawyer, inventor, president.
Entrepreneur? No.
Hey, well, kind of.
As a young man, old Abe took a boatload of merchandise down to the Mississippi River from New Salem to New Orleans. At one point, the boat slid onto a dam and was set free only after heroic efforts. In later years, while traveling on the Great Lakes, Lincoln's ship ran afoul of a sandbar. The resultant invention consists of a set of bellows attached to the hull of a ship just below the waterline. On reaching a shallow place, the bellows are filled with air, and the vessel, thus buoyed, is expected to float clear. Oh, okay.
Well, the invention was never marketed, probably because of the extra weight would have increased the probability of running into sandbars more frequently.
Right.
So you're creating a problem just to solve it.
Right.
Lincoln whittled the model for his patent application with his own hands. It is on display as we speak at the Smithsonian Institution National Museum of American History. Patent number 6469 for a device for buoying vessels over shoals was issued May 22nd, 1849.
Nice.
In 1858, he called the introduction of patent laws one of the three most important developments in the world's history.
You ain't kidding.
His words, the patent system added the fuel of interest to the fire of genius. They are inscribed over the U.S. Commerce Department's north entrance.
Yeah, patents.
Well, yeah, you got a patent system that strives people to make it better instead of just profiting off of your shit that you built. How do I get my own patent? Well, I can approve this and do this. And yeah.
Winter of 1842, 1843. Strong encouragement of his wife, Lincoln decided to pursue election to the United States House.
She was a powerful man, didn't she?
This was from the newly created 7th Congressional District. Oh, so we got a seat. We got a seat available. His main rivals were friends Edward Baker and John Hardin. February 14th, Lincoln told a local Whig political leader, "If you should hear anyone say that Lincoln don't want to go to Congress, I wish you, as a personal friend of mine, would tell him you have reason to believe he is mistaken. The truth is, I would like to go very much."
I bet you would. At the end of February, the Whigs met in Springfield, where Lincoln wrote the party platform opposing direct federal taxes and endorsing a protective tariff, a national bank, a distribution to the states of proceeds from federal land sales, and the convention system of choosing candidates.
Okay.
Baker and Lincoln campaigned vigorously throughout March, but Lincoln, believing that Baker had an insurmountable lead, he withdrew when the Sangamon County Convention was held on March 20th.
Oh, he should have stayed, bud. Well, Lincoln, he was selected as a delegate to the district convention, which met on the 1st of May in Pekin. Although Lincoln worked hard for Baker, Hardin was selected as the Whig candidate, winning by one single vote.
Damn.
Lincoln then initiated a resolution that endorsed Baker for the nomination in 2 years. The resolution passed, which seemed to set a precedent for a single term with rotation among the party's leaders. Okay. And suggested that Lincoln would be the next in line after Baker.
So you got 4 years, bud.
Right. Makes sense.
1844, Lincoln campaigned enthusiastically for Henry Clay, who was the Whig nominee for president and a personal hero of his. On the campaign trail, Lincoln and the other Illinois Whigs emphasized tariff issues while touting the economic success of the tariff of 1842 that had been passed in Congress under Whig leadership. Part of the campaign pitted Lincoln in a series of debates against Democrat John Calhoun, who was a candidate for Congress. Campaigned in Illinois for the most of 1844, he spoke out against the annexation of Texas, who was a potential slave territory. He promoted national and state banks and opposed the wave of nativism that would become a major political issue a decade later.
Damn right it did. On the last issue, Lincoln declared that the guarantee of the rights of conscience, as found in our Constitution, is the most sacred and inviolable, and one that belongs no less to the Catholic than to the Protestant, and all that attempts to abridge or interfere with these rights, either of Catholic or Protestant, directly or indirectly, have our decided disapprobation, and shall ever have our most effective opposition.
Basically saying
Y'all won.
everybody can come.
Yeah.
Clay's opponent, James K. Polk, carried Illinois and also won the presidency. In Illinois and elsewhere, Polk's support for the acquisition of Texas and Oregon seemed to carry the day. Lincoln and many other Whigs blamed the Free Soil Liberty Party for dividing the vote in New York, which allowed Polk to carry that state and achieve the majority in the Electoral College. In responding to an anti-slavery Whig who equated voting for Clay, who was a slaveholder, as doing evil, Lincoln asked, if the fruit of electing Mr. Clay would have been to prevent the extension of slavery, could the act of electing him have been evil?
Hardin, he did not run for re-election in 1844. The Whig nomination, as previously agreed, went to Baker, who won election. Baker agreed not to run for re-election in 1846, but Hardin considered a run for his old seat. Much of the 7th District was included within the judicial circuit that Lincoln rode. So beginning on the September 1845, he began soliciting the support of Whig leaders and editors as he moved throughout the circuit. Old Lincoln emphasized that Hardin should be bound by the understanding reached at Pekin in 1843. He's like, he should not even be on this trail.
The debate over what had actually been agreed on in 1843 became public and bitter. In the end, Hardin withdrew and Lincoln secured the Whig nomination.
Nice.
The Democrats nominated Peter Cartwright, who was a circuit-riding Methodist preacher.
Oh.
Lincoln campaigned throughout the district where he was already well known. Although he was presented with campaign funds of $200, he returned most of the money after the election. Speaking of his actual campaign expenses, he noted, I made the canvass on my own horse. My entertainment, being at the houses of friends, cost me nothing. And my only outlay was 75 cents for a barrel of cider, which some farmhands insisted I should treat them to.
Oh, nice. There were few newspaper accounts of the election, but the major political issues were the annexation of Texas, which Lincoln opposed as an expansion of slavery, the Mexican War, on which Lincoln was non-committal, and the Oregon border dispute with Great Britain, which Lincoln avoided.
We don't want to mess with those guys right now.
Right. Cartwright, he avoided joint appearances with Lincoln and initiated a whispering campaign that accused Lincoln of being an infidel and a religious skeptic. Lincoln responded by pointing out that the Illinois Constitution had no religious qualifications for office. What's that have to do with anything?
All right. July 31st, he published a handbill that admitted he was not a member of a specific Christian church, but denied that he was an open scoffer at Christianity or had ever denied the truth of the scriptures.
Okay.
Cartwright's campaign was effective only in counties where Lincoln was not personally known.
Right.
Lincoln, he won the election with 56% of the vote, topping the numbers of Hardin at 53% and Baker at 52%.
Wow.
When they ran.
Right.
Due to the timing of the elections, the 30th Congress did not convene until December of 1847.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
A Whig and an admirer of the party leader Henry Clay, Lincoln, elected to a term in the United States House, 1846, representing the 7th Congressional District of Illinois. As a freshman House member, he was not a particularly powerful or influential figure. Obviously not. He spoke out against the Mexican-American War, which he attributed to President Polk's desire for military glory, that attractive rainbow that rises in showers of blood. He also challenged the president's claims regarding the Texas boundary and offered spot resolutions demanding to know the spot on U.S. soil where blood was first spilled. Oh. Okay.
You tell me where blood was first spilled, and then we'll, I guess.
On American soil.
Right. January 1848, Lincoln was among the 82 Whigs who defeated 81 Democrats in a procedural vote on an amendment to send a routine resolution back to the committee with instructions to add the words, "A war unnecessarily and unconstitutionally begun by the President of the United States."
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. The amendment passed, but the bill never reemerged from committee and was never finally voted upon. They were like, we're not doing that.
Right.
Lincoln later damaged his political reputation with a speech in which he declared, "God of heaven has forgotten to defend the weak and innocent, and permitted the strong band of murderers and demons from hell to kill men, women, and children, and lay waste and pillage the land of the just." Oh, wow. Oh, wow. You don't want to do that. This is like the most religious freaking time in history.
And 2 weeks later, President Polk
Not in history, but you know.
Right. 2 weeks later, President Polk signed a peace treaty to Congress. While no one in Washington paid attention to Lincoln, the Democrats orchestrated angry outbursts from across his district, where the war was popular and many had volunteered. Morgan County, Illinois, resolutions were adopted in fervent support of the war and in wrathful denunciation of the treasonable assaults of guerrillas at home, party demagogues and slanderers of the president, defenders of the butchery at the Alamo, traducers of the heroism at San Jacinto. Wow, they're just pissed. Warned by his law partner, William Herndon, that the damage was mounting and irreparable.
Irreparable.
Yep. Lincoln decided not to run for re-election.
He said, no, not doing that.
Hey, can we calm this down for a minute?
In the 1848 presidential election, Lincoln supported war hero Zachary Taylor for the Whig nomination and for president in the general. In abandoning Clay, Lincoln argued that Taylor was the only Whig that was electable. Lincoln, he attended the Whig National Convention in Philadelphia as a Taylor delegate. Following Taylor's successful nomination, Lincoln urged Taylor to run a campaign emphasizing his personal traits while leaving the controversial issues to be resolved by Congress. While Congress was in session, Lincoln spoke in favor of Taylor on the House floor, and when it adjourned in August, he remained in Washington to assist Whig Executive Committee of Congress in the campaign. So we're getting this guy, you gotta go.
Gotta go. And you have to go right now. September, Lincoln made campaign speeches in Boston and other New England locations. Remembering the election of 1844, Lincoln addressed potential free soil voters by saying that the Whigs were equally opposed to slavery, and the only issue was how they could most effectively vote against the expansion of slavery. Lincoln argued that a vote for the free soil candidate, former President Martin Van Buren, would divide the anti-slavery vote and give the election to the Democratic candidate Lewis Cass. Ooh, can you imagine President Lewis Cass?
Right.
I mean, Van Buren wasn't much better.
Right. With Taylor's victory, the incoming administration, perhaps remembering Lincoln's criticism of Taylor during the Mexican-American War, they offered Lincoln only the governorship of remote Oregon Territory.
Wow.
This distant territory was a Democratic stronghold, and acceptance of the post would have effectively ended his legal and political career in Illinois.
Right.
So he declined and resumed his law practice. Lincoln returned to practicing law in Springfield, handling every kind of business that could come before a prairie lawyer. Twice a year for 16 years, 10 weeks at a time, he appeared in county seats in the mid-state region when the county courts were in session. And that, my friends, was going to be the end of his early life into his early political career. Next week will be, it's time.
He says, you know what? I think I'm going to gear up to be the next president of the United States of this America.
Yes, sir. We're going to take a look at a little bit of the lead up to that election. We're going to take a look at the actual election. Yeah, we're going to basically look at his election or his campaign and then the election and all that stuff on part 2. And before we head into his actual presidency in part 3. And obviously part 4, we're going to end it with his life.
Yes.
So that's it. That's our first behind the battles of this Battles of the American Civil War. And boy, that's not bad. It'll be about an hour and 20. Guess it's not bad. Abraham Lincoln. That's his early life. Did some things.
Did some things. He sure did.
I guess the most obvious thing, the most craziest thing that stuck out to me is the dude was involved in a duel that nobody ever talks about.
Right. And he was smart enough to use a sword instead of a gun.
Right, because he knew the guy would blow his brains out. So
do we have to have a weapon? Yes.
Right. Can we just fist fight?
No.
Yeah, we'll be looking at his campaign for presidency on the next episode. And that's where we'll be. This is it. We're starting off the year 2025 with a bang.
Bang.
Battles of the American Civil War. Where are the Mouth of Michiganders?
We're starting the year 2025 off with the bang and dang.
Bang, dang.